Hello everyone, welcome to another video on the channel, welcome to another Gran Turismo 7 science video, and in this one I'm going to see if I can help you to improve your tyre wear on the DualShock 5 or the control pad, whatever you call it. Now, one of the biggest complaints from DualShock 5 players or pad players compared to the wheel players is that they suffer from greater tyre wear. This is no doubt the case. I have done a test on this myself on Gran Turismo 7, albeit not in a video, but we did do a video of that on Gran Turismo Sport, and we did find that our tyre wear was around about 25% worse. Now, that's probably worse than what a regular pad player is getting compared to a wheel player. I very rarely play on the pad, but in this one I am going to try and understand where that difference in tyre wear is coming from between the wheel and the pad. I'm going to do that by running the same test on the wheel and the DualShock 5, the test conditions of which are on the screen. So we're going to be in the Volkswagen Scirocco Group 4 at the Catalunya National Circuit. We're going to do 8 laps, it's going to be on the racing medium tyres, tyre wear is going to be at ×5, fuel is going to be at ×1, traction control is going to be off, and we're going to be using ABS on weak, because we're still using ABS weak as I find it a little bit faster. And contrary to what maybe some people might be saying out there, your tyre wear is not worse on weak as compared to default. I have tested this fairly comprehensively off video, and yeah, there's definitely no real difference out there. But yeah, we'll run the same test, everything will be to the exact same conditions, of course. It'll be ran one after the other, and then I'm going to sort of try and understand where that tyre wear is coming from on the pad compared to the Logitech G Pro, which is the wheel we are using, of course. So this first run we're taking a look at here, we come to the end of lap 8, is on the Logitech G Pro. We're not trying to do any kind of tyre saving here, we are just running some laps, trying to be nice and consistent, actually using the proper track limits for the chicane as well, so we're going to do that on every lap as well, on the wheel or the pad regardless. Coming over the start finish line here though to finish lap 8. Good bit of tyre wear there, as you can see on the front left tyre, as you would expect, and the finishing time, just for reference if you want to check these things as we go through the video, was 10 minutes 02.4. So the next test here, running exactly the same test, running it straight after the first one. We're still on the wheel, we're on the Logitech G Pro, but we're going to do some tyre saving in this one. So basically what we're going to do, we're just going to be a lot more careful about our inputs on the car. Obviously with an FF car like the Scirocco is, a lot of stress going through those front tyres, particularly in acceleration zone, so I'm trying to be careful about applying the throttle coming out of the corners. If we apply the throttle too early, it puts too much power through the wheels, the front tyres scrub across the track and they're going to cause some additional tyre wear. Try to be a little bit more careful on the brakes, being careful about that steering angle. Of course, when you're on the wheel, and this is going to make a lot more sense later on, or certainly going to be relevant, you've got that visual reference about how much steering input you're putting into the car with the steering wheel in front of you. And in terms of lap time, we never lost too much in terms of pace, and actually because we looked after the tyres a little bit better, we had a little bit more pace at the end and finished about 1.5 seconds faster. So moving on to the run on the DualShock 5 now. As you're well aware, I play on the wheel. I've played Gran Turismo 7 on the wheel from the get-go, so my experience on the pad is very limited. In terms of lap time, a 1:15.5 is about 4 tenths off what we're doing on the wheel, but the consistency is definitely not there. And the tyre wear, as you can see in the bottom right hand corner, even at this point you can see how much more tyre wear there is on that front left tyre. And the lap times are reflecting that. The tyres have gone, but we're picking up a lot of penalties as well. Just a lack of overall consistency on the pad. That should get better as we go into some further test runs, but we're around about 10 seconds slower than the wheel over the course of the 8 lap run. But here's a look at that all important tyre wear of the 3 runs compared to each other. So furthest over on the left hand side there, you've clearly got the DualShock 5. You can just see how much more tyre wear we've had compared to the 2 runs on the Logitech G Pro. It's around about, what, maybe 30% worse than the non-tyre saving run, and maybe about 40% worse compared to the tyre saving run. So significant amount of tyres saved when we did actually kind of try to be a little bit more gentle with the car on the 2 wheel runs. So you can see the benefit of just being more gentle with the car even compared to the two-wheel runs, in terms of just being a little bit more gentle on the brakes, being a lot more kind of careful on that steering angle as you go into the corners, and just making sure the car's a little bit more straightened up before you get on the throttle to prevent that tyre scrub. So a significant difference between the two-wheel runs when we compare the tyre saving versus the non-tyre saving. So we know the techniques that we're applying when doing the tyre saving on the wheel work to save the tyres, but the difference between the wheel and the DualShock 5 is pretty enormous. Now, I don't think a regular good DualShock 5 player will be suffering quite the same differential as we are seeing on the screen here. I'm very inexperienced in the pad. I've not really learned how to put less stress through the car. I won't have that smoothness and that finesse, but it definitely demonstrates that there is a big difference between the wheel and the pad. So I'm going to try and learn, or the idea is I'm going to try and learn where that difference was coming from. So I studied the lap on the DualShock 5 compared to the Logitech G Pro just to see what was going on different in the car. So we're on the onboard view, and coming into turn 1 here, the first thing you can see is quite clearly on the DualShock 5 we are putting a lot more steering lock into the car compared to the Logitech G Pro. So that's just going to be scrubbing those front tyres across the track as we apply the power. Now, it's not the same for every corner. Coming through the faster corners, they don't tend to see anywhere near the same kind of difference in the steering angle. And coming into the big braking zones, I could see that the braking on the DualShock 5 was a lot more harsh, a lot more sudden, and a lot less finesse. So it's more like an on-off switch. I was using the brakes and probably not using the analog of the DualShock 5 triggers quite to their full extent. One thing I will say on the DualShock 5 that I did feel I could brake later into the big braking zones. It's more like you could just get that instant braking compared to the wheel. It definitely was an advantage in terms of how late I could brake. But again, coming into the chicane here, look how much more steering angle we're putting in to the first part of the chicane to get the car round the corner. So what I learned from watching these kind of back-to-back videos was that we had to somehow reduce the number of, or the amount of steering angle we were putting in, and try and be a little bit more gentle and a little bit more finesse on the brakes. We jumped back out onto the track, exactly the same test conditions, 8 laps, tyrewear at ×5, racing mediums. This is on the DualShock 5 here, and I decided to do the first run from the onboard camera because I wanted to just see what the driver's wheel was doing, what the hands were doing, and give me a visual reference as to how much sort of application on the stick I had to put in to actually get the sort of car into the corner and to get that kind of wheel to 90 degrees. Because I've always said that unless you're going around a hairpin, you really shouldn't be rotating the wheel any more than 90 degrees. So having done that run there, and it was fairly consistent, it wasn't too bad at all. A little bit slower, we're getting in the sort of low 16, 16 1, 16 zeros. I thought, okay, I've now got a kind of rough idea how much I have to move the stick in certain corners. I was a little bit better on the brakes. Let's go back into hood view where we've got a little bit more visibility and do the same run again on the DualShock and see if we can kind of just use what we've learned from comparing the videos and from what we learned looking at the driver's hands and kind of learning how much we could kind of get away. Try not to move the stick from the full range from left to right in the corners. Could be kind of be a little bit more, you know, have a little bit more finesse and everything, I think is the best way to put it. Not move the stick the full range that it needs to be unnecessarily. Don't be quite so harsh in the brakes. Try and use the analog part of the triggers. Could we then take everything we've learned, do a run of 8 laps and look after the tyres a little bit better. So the lap times are not great. We're actually not too bad for the first 4 laps. Then we put a couple of duff laps in as we kind of just lost our kind of flow a little bit. But coming over the line here for a 15.8 on the last lap on the DualShock 5, significantly better than we had managed at any other point to keep the tyres alive towards the end of the run. And let's take a look at what we managed to achieve. So we've got the original DualShock 5 run there on the left hand side. We've got the DualShock 5 run with the cockpit cam and then the DualShock 5 with the hood cam. And you can see we have made huge progress in looking after our tyres just in a very short period of time. That's a huge improvement over what we did originally on the DualShock 5. Interestingly, our tyrewear in the cockpit cam is actually better than hood cam, so it would seem that having that visual reference from the interior view and being able to see where I didn't have to put as much movement into the stick to get the car round the corner, did prove to be a little bit of an advantage. Obviously in hood cam or bonnet cam or bumper cam or chase cam, you don't have that visual reference, so maybe it's something you have to kind of practice a little bit more just to learn to be a little bit more finesseful on the stick. And our last comparison is back to the DualShock 5 versus the wheel. And we're going to take our best run on the DualShock 5, which was in cockpit cam, and compare it to the tyres on the 2 runs we did with the Logitech G Pro. Obviously, we're still not anywhere near as good as the G Pro when we were doing the tyre saving, but very interestingly, the cockpit camera and the no tyre saving run on the Logitech G Pro are actually very similar. And to be honest with you, the tyre wear on the front right tyre is actually a little bit better on the DualShock 5 compared to the no tyre saving run. So it is possible to look after your tyres on the pad. And what I learned from this is that you have to be more careful on steering angle, which is easier said than done. You've only got a finite amount of movement on the stick, and it's very tempting going into any corner to just move it the full scope of left to right. But I did find if you could kind of not move it quite as far and kind of learn what corners you didn't have to move the stick as far, you then end up putting a little bit less steering angle into the corners, which would naturally help you to look after the front tyres. And secondly, I was surprised when I did the comparison lap how big or how different the braking kind of characteristics were on the wheel compared to a set of, on the DualShock 5 compared to a set of pedals, which kind of then prompted me that, you know, rather than kind of using the trigger like an on-off switch, almost like I did on the original run, I have to try and use the analog element of the trigger a little bit more. Don't maybe fully depress it, and then just kind of just generally be a lot more gentle. It's very hard to describe into words, but once you kind of realise what you've got to try and do with the trigger, and then you can try some practice some different stuff on it, it did start to become a little bit more natural. And I felt just straight away, once I got that in my head, I could see what I was doing wrong, I was able to then adjust what I was doing to try and help look after that tyre wear. And I think the results speak for themselves. You could see the difference that we made in a very short period of time in terms of learning how to look after our tyres on the pad. The results were there to see from the screenshot. So hopefully you can take what I've learned here, maybe take it into your own practice, your own racing, and you can start to learn to look after your tyres a little bit more on the pad. I don't think it's ever going to be quite as good as the wheel. You just don't have the finesse that you do on a wheel. You just don't have that visual reference in a lot of the views that you're going to be using with the DualShock 5. You're very unlikely to be using the DualShock 5 and cockpit view, so you lose that visual reference. But maybe again you could learn to use the visual reference from the red dot on top of the rev meter if you're using a different view. But yeah, as I said, hopefully this video and what I've learned here is something you can maybe take forward into your own practice, into your own racing. And if you're really suffering with tyre wear on the pad, maybe some of the stuff we've discussed here, looked at here, can help you to start improving that tyre wear. Again, even if you're on the wheel, hopefully the video has been useful in some way, shape or form for helping you to look after your tyres on the wheel. Again, it just comes down to just being more gentle in everything, and you'll just tend to find yourself being a little bit smoother, and you'll almost see that you don't lose any lap time whatsoever, if any at all. I always tend to find any kind of tyre test I do on the wheel, I don't lose any lap time, but it's easier said than done to then take that into the race where it's the pressure situation. You find yourself driving the car harder, overdriving a little bit, burning those tyres out. So yeah, it's practice situations compared to race situations are obviously very different. It's very easy to, in a practice situation, you've got the time, you've not got the pressure to try and put these sort of techniques into practice. And I can appreciate very much when it comes to the race situation, a car on your backside, you're trying not to hit the car in front, that technique goes out the window and effort becomes the sort of more prominent thing that you do. But yeah, hopefully, as I said, the video's been useful in some way, shape or form. Whether you're on the pad, whether you're on the wheel, let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye now.